In death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes. What you have to realize is that we're all just a mouse that a cat has by the tail. Every single move we make, from the mundane to the monumental, the red light that we stop at or run, the people we have sex with or want with us, the airplanes that we ride or walk out of. It's all part of death's sadistic design, leading to the grave.
Because in the end, no one can escape death. And today may be your day to die.
Welcome to Now Playing's Final Destination retrospective series.
Every survivor died, in the precise order they were meant to die in the accident.
So now does that mean we all die?
Join Brock, Marjorie, and Arnie as they watch and review another film in the Final Destination series.
Great. I'm glad I canceled my golf game for this. Good.
This podcast will contain spoilers and harsh language. Listener discretion is advised.
Hope you have fun.
Today we're talking about Final Destination, Bloodlines, starring Caitlin Santawana, Teo Briones, Richard Harmon, Owen Patrick Joyner, Anna Lore, with Breck Bassinger and Tony Todd. This is Brock, co-host of Now Playing.
This is Marjorie.
And this is your relentless son of a bitch, Arnie. And we are back at Final Destination. You know, I did not want to see this movie at all because it is called Bloodlines. Let's look at the Bloodlines Now Playing has reviewed. Pet Sematary Bloodlines, we covered that 2 years ago. It was a piece of shit. Tremors 5 Bloodlines. Admittedly, none of the Tremors were that bad, but that wasn't one of the better ones. Hellraiser Bloodline. I find some fun with Pinhead in space, but I know people hate that one. Day of the Dead Bloodline. One of the absolute worst of the Dead series. And maybe someday we'll get to Wrong Turn 5 Bloodlines. I mean, this is not a unique title, and it usually signifies lazy shit. So...
Wow. I've read quite a few books with the Bloodlines subtitle too, and it's just one of those things that why do they keep using this? However, in this case, Arnie, it kind of feels more appropriate, I would think, than all the other examples you just cited.
Yeah, it just always indicates legacy, and especially with horror films, you'll notice just about everything I mentioned was a horror film.
Right.
Blood. Let's mention blood. Let's also mention that Marjorie is joining us on the Final Destination retrospective series now. Welcome, Marjorie.
Hello, everyone. I have watched all the movies, so don't worry, I watched them before this because I think this series is pretty good. Kind of law of diminishing returns, but, you know.
We watched all of these as they came out together. The first one came out in the year 2000 when we met, and we saw that one together and went to several of them in theaters.
In our last podcast in 2011 for Final Destination 5, I had mentioned at the end of the show that I could see myself rewatching some of these as time goes by, and I've had the pleasure of watching the first 3 with my teenage daughter, because she and I have been sharing horror movies these past couple of years, and she wanted something lighter. We had so much fun revisiting it with her. When I came home from the movie theater, she asked, "Is it good?" I'm like, "Oh my God, you're going to love this."
And as you mentioned, it's been 14 years since Final Destination 5. It's so weird because they wanted part 4 to be the grand finale, and then it made a lot of money. And so they did part 5, and when part 5 came out, Tony Todd was like, well, if this one makes money, they're going to film 6 and 7 back to back.
Right.
And it did make good money. But it felt like an ending. I rewatched all of these movies because it's been 14 years, and part 5 ends with that greatest hits credit sequence of all the deaths from all 5 films, kind of like the Freddy's Dead, Say Goodbye to Freddy montage at the end of that movie. So it felt like a closing. They've been trying to get this going since 2019. They had a script, it's available out there on the internet, where it was about a bunch of first responders. And I'm guessing there was an accident that they were responding to, and one of them saved all their lives, and now firefighters and paramedics and cops are cheating death.
Oh, that sounds like it wouldn't be as much fun just because those people put their lives in danger all the time, you know? That sounds like a pall could be cast upon that script.
Maybe. It's out there if you want to find the script and read it. I didn't look that hard for it, but I did read some things that were in it. And then they announced in 2021 that they were going to make a new one for HBO Max. When it was called HBO Max, before it was called Max, before it was called HBO Max again. But the person who really kicked this off is John Watts. And if that name sounds familiar, but you're not sure where you know it from, John Watts is the guy who was blessed with getting the gig for Spider-Man Homecoming and ended up directing all 3 of the MCU Spider-Man films. He's also done 3 other films. He's the one who came up with the idea of, let's make this a family story. People connected by blood, whereas the previous films were friends or strangers all going through this together.
I wonder why that was the hook for him to get back into this series. You would think that it would be, since so much time has passed, there's so many new ways that people could die, might be the hook to get back in. And of course, the streaming thing makes complete sense, especially when it first launched, because there were so many, I would like to say, unnecessary sequels and IP coming back just for that familiarity so people would come to those streaming services. Disney Plus did a slew of those kind of things. And so that makes total sense to me. What I'm happy is that they put a budget behind this and put it in the theaters, just because that makes the most sense. You know, like a horror franchise, in my mind, should definitely go back to the theaters, as long as there are audiences who go, so you can have that communal experience of a horror movie.
I do agree. Seeing this with our audience, especially the second time we saw this, was a lot of fun. I was also nervous, though, not only because it was called Bloodlines, but because this is being co-directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein. Zach Lipovsky, we've reviewed 2 of his movies here on Now Playing, and they're 2 of the worst movies we've reviewed on Now Playing. I even got to interview Zach Lipovsky back in 2014 at San Diego Comic-Con. Nice guy, shitty movies. Leprechaun Origins? The one where they decided to make the leprechaun scary and not cute and funny? Oh, that was a bad one, with Hornswoggle as the leprechaun. And then the video game movie Dead Rising Watchtower, which I honestly have pretty much put out of my mind both the Dead Rising movies. I remember exactly where I was when I watched them streaming on Crackle, and...
Wow.
Crackle? What the hell is Crackle?
Oh my god. It's a channel. Ugh.
And so, if this guy's directing a Bloodlines movie, it's got to be shit. You know, it's like the anti-Smuckers.
Oh, man. Look, what got me about this was these guys are not exactly known. I mean, obviously they've done stuff, we reviewed them here, but if you have someone like John Watts behind it, why not hire a director who's done more stuff under their belt? It always makes me suspect when you have fairly new directors to come into a genre movie like this one.
I'll tell you how they got this gig, Brock. They were clever. They worked for it. They were having a Zoom call with like 15 producers and financiers and pitching them on this idea of how they would tell it. And then mid-Zoom call, they faked one of them getting their head chopped off by a ceiling fan, just in a Final Destination kind of way. They had rigged it up so that the webcam was at the right angle, and they had all the special effects going. And so the producers and things through the Zoom saw someone get their head chopped off, and then, this is the kind of thing we do. And that got it.
You know, I tried that in a job interview once, and I didn't get the job. Oh, well.
Yeah, the only thing that gave me hope was one of the 2 credited screenwriters on here was Gary Busick, and he has done stuff that I have liked. Ready or Not, Abigail, which I really did like last year. That one took me by surprise. Scream 5, Scream 6. He's also the sole writer of Scream 7. He was co-writer on most of that, so, you know, was he doing the good stuff or was he doing something that somebody else was then fixing? Hard to say, but he also co-wrote this. So if there's any light in the fog of this talent, I will say, it's him.
Mm-hmm. So you guys saw it twice. What was your audience reactions overall?
Well, the first time we saw it, an Alamo-like place. They do kind of keep the texting and noise down, which is nice. And so then we saw it again last night at AMC on the IMAX laser projection. And I have to say, first of all, that screen was amazing. Noticeable difference in the clarity and brightness of the movie. It was very worth it going there. That crowd was a lot different. The lady that was sitting a seat away from Arnie cackled, like literally cackled, at numerous times during these deaths or funny things. The scene when they found out that Eric wasn't Howard's son, they're like, oh, it was really good with the audience participation in this one. I mean, they were lively, they laughed at the right parts, and it's always great when you have somebody who overreacts near you anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we saw this twice because I noticed it had said filmed for IMAX. Now, sometimes that just means we're putting it on IMAX. This isn't Sinners, where they pulled out the expensive IMAX cameras and shot on 68 millimeter film or anything like that. But I was surprised how much of this movie was actually shown in the expanded IMAX ratio. Far more than Sinners, I will say. Every single death scene in this, including the extended opening, is in the full IMAX frame. And it had a very cool transition where, like, the picture would expand. It wasn't like how a lot of them do it, where it's just a cut and it's now a different ratio. This one would, like, zoom bigger and show you more and then zoom smaller again. And because the death scenes here are so protracted, I'd say, yeah, almost half the film used the expanded IMAX ratio.
Oh, so it's worthwhile seeing an IMAX if you can see it just for those reasons. That's a good thing to know.
Yeah, Final Destination has always taken advantage of its tech. I did rewatch all 5 for this, and I rewatched 4 and 5 in 3D, and I forgot how great the 3D was in those. I can't imagine watching those in 2D because it's so in-your-face type stuff that if it's not poking out at you, it kind of reminds me of Friday the 13th Part 3 when I used to watch that on video, and you could just tell that, like, that eyeball is supposed to be in your face, and it just looks like shit.
Yes.
And so here, with Final Destination 4 and 5, watching those in 3D was great, and here, 3D's kind of passé again now, but they use the IMAX to the maximum.
Overall, my audience was very quiet. Very, very quiet. So it was a different experience in the audience for what you guys had, and skewed much older. There was not a lot of young people in the audience, so it was like people who would know the series came to see it.
Ours was pretty diverse, I have to say. Lots of races, lots of ages.
And I don't know if you guys saw that one of the marketing things they had with this movie is they invited a bunch of people and their mothers to come see a very special Mother's Day movie, and they showed them this movie.
I did see that.
Which is awesome!
Fantastic, really clever, and it went viral, and I can only imagine if that was my mother, she would just freak out. Yeah.
My mother would have loved it.
And it truly is a movie about mothers and female lineage. I mean, they didn't lie. I did like that some of the marketing for this is they had a log truck drive around. I don't know if it was just LA or what, but they had a truck with maybe real logs, maybe fake logs, and then some log-looking banners that said Final Destination Bloodlines. They know what the best kill in the entire series is. They're going to play to it.
Yes, I think that they did a really good job on the marketing for this movie.
So, Arnie, why don't you start the Harry Nilsson music and give us a plot summary?
In May 1968, Iris and her boyfriend Paul go to the opening of the Skyview Tower. Each of them has a secret. Iris doesn't know Paul is going to use that night to propose to her, and Paul doesn't know that Iris is pregnant. What Iris does know, though, is the Skyview Tower is going to collapse. A combination of poor construction, stomping dancers, and a bratty kid cause a disaster that kills everyone in the tower. Iris has a psychic vision of this and is able to get everyone to safety. In the present, we're introduced to our main character, Stephanie, played by Caitlin Santa-Juana. She is a college student who's plagued with nightmares of her grandmother's 1968 disaster, yet Stephanie has never met her grandmother. Iris became a paranoid recluse, estranged from her son and daughter, Stephanie's mother and uncle. Stephanie goes to meet her grandmother, who explains that death was intended for everyone in that tower. Since Iris saved their lives, death has been coming for everyone in that tower, in order, as well as any offspring and descendants those people had. Iris had been keeping a journal of all their deaths, as well as ways to keep death at bay. She hasn't left her fortified cabin in over 20 years to keep herself safe. Iris now has cancer, and she knows death will be coming for her children and grandchildren. She tries to give her book and knowledge to Stephanie, but the young woman thinks her grandmother is crazy. Stephanie starts to believe, however, when Iris steps outside for the first time in decades and, minutes later, dies in a freak accident involving a fire extinguisher and a weather vane. Stephanie's absentee mother, Darlene, arrives for Iris's funeral, the first time anyone has seen Darlene in 10 years. Darlene adopted some of Iris's paranoia about death, and so she left her husband and children as to not cause her children psychological harm. Stephanie starts to believe Iris's rantings, and that belief is driven home when a freak accident ends with a lawnmower grinding up Uncle Howard's face. Stephanie tries to convince her family that death is coming for them in birth order. Uncle Howard was Iris's first child, so now Howard's 3 children. Oldest son Eric, middle sister Julia, and youngest son Bobby are next. Then death will come for Stephanie's mom Darlene, Stephanie herself, and finally, Stephanie's younger brother Charlie. Of course, Stephanie's family thinks she's crazy. That night, though, Eric suffers a freak accident at the tattoo shop where he works, but he escapes mostly unscathed. Emboldened, Eric mocks Stephanie's fear of accidents, until yet another freak accident ends with Eric's sister Julia crushed to death in a garbage truck. That's when Aunt Brenda, who married into the family so isn't part of the bloodline, reveals Howard wasn't Eric's real dad, so death is skipping Eric. Julia was always next in line, and now it's Bobby's turn. Iris's book says someone named J.B. knows someone who survived death's curse, and J.B. turns out to be John William Bloodworth, played by Tony Todd in his final role. They go to see J.B. at the hospital, and he reveals he was a little boy at Skyview Tower. He was the last to die in Iris's vision, seconds after Iris herself. So now that Iris is dead, once Iris's family dies, death will be coming for him. He says the only way to break death's chain is either to kill someone, and then you get their remaining life, or to die yourself and be resuscitated. Eric thinks the way to save his brother Bobby is to have Bobby eat some peanuts, to which Bobby is deathly allergic. The intent is Bobby will flatline, and then Eric will wheel him to the ER where he can be brought back. But as Bobby is having his allergic reaction, an MRI machine goes on overload. First, Eric is crushed by a flying wheelchair, and then Bobby by a rogue piece of a vending machine. Darlene now thinks the only way to save her children is if she goes and lives in Iris's cabin. As long as Darlene lives, death won't take Stephanie and Charlie. The two drive their mother to Iris's cabin, but death is coming for Iris. They crash through the gate to Iris's house, but that breaks Stephanie's seatbelt, and she's trapped in Darlene's RV. Charlie tries to get Darlene to the safety of the cabin, but a malfunctioning light causes the cabin to explode, and Darlene is crushed by the falling light. Meanwhile, Stephanie is drowning to death in the RV, which rolled into some water. Charlie rescues Stephanie, but has to use CPR to revive his older sister. Charlie and Stephanie are now relaxed in the comfort that, by Stephanie dying and coming back, they stopped death. Until an actual MD points out that Stephanie didn't really die. Her heart never stopped, she just stopped breathing. Just then a train derails, and the logs it was carrying fly off and crush first Stephanie and then Charlie, as a penny and credits roll.
Ah, cute. So we start off with a couple who clearly looks like they're 1960s listening to Creedence Clearwater Revival's Bad Moon Rising, which quickly switches to Ring of Fire, which really, I know music plays a huge part in Final Destination movies. We've talked about that before. Here, I was really paying attention to the music selections. Normally, when things are so on the nose, it kind of pisses me off. But here, I kind of thought it was funny that they had Bad Moon Rising and Ring of Fire right off the top. It seemed appropriate that they would start the movie with something like, starting off the how are they going to get people to die.
I was obsessed with when is this? Part of the reason I went back twice is there were two things from this opening I wanted to know. First, there's a glimpse of Paul's license plate, and I saw 18, and they always like to put in Easter eggs for 180, the flight number of the first movie, and so I'm like, I didn't glimpse it fast enough on the first viewing. It turns out his license plate is FL818E. So Flight 180.
Yeah, nice.
The second thing I wanted to know, though, is when is this opening? Because you say they look like the 60s, but with her hair, with the dresses, I was thinking it might be the 50s, which really led me down a path of thinking this might be a redo of what they did in part 4, where it was a period piece movie, because they say this tower happened 50 years ago. So if this is happening in the 50s, I thought maybe this was going to end with like Charlie getting on Flight 180 and it crashes just like they ended part 5.
I was pretty sure it was the 60s, and then the penny, when it comes right to the screen, says 1968. Clear as day.
And I caught that on the second viewing. I wasn't looking for the date on the penny the first time.
I absolutely did. I was like, oh, thank God, because I really wanted to make sure I was right about the 60s, yeah.
But then it could be the 70s because, you know, the penny could come at any time. It's rare that you have a penny from the year you're in. But during the end credits, we see a news clipping about this Skyview restaurant falling, and it says it's May 17th, 1968. When they say it's 50 years ago, it's really close to 60 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
But the other thing is, Bad Moon Rising, on the radio, they're listening to it. That song wasn't even recorded until March of 1969.
Oh, well, you know, we'll give it to him.
I mean, of all the things in this movie, I'm willing to forget that.
That's a good point, yeah.
Well, the trailers did show this was going to be an old lady who had a premonition way back when. And so we start here with them going to the Skyview restaurant. At first, I thought they were at the Space Needle in Seattle. It looks just like the Space Needle.
I did too. But if you catch later on, because it was a very nondescript town, but I'm wondering if it's like Rhode Island because there was Providence on the garbage truck.
Oh, that may well be. I did catch when they pull out Iris's letters, she has a New York state address. I didn't catch the city she was in. But yeah, you could drive from Rhode Island to New York.
Easily, I've done it.
So we get Iris and Paul coming to the Sky Tower, and right away we're introduced to this bratty kid who's at the bottom stealing coins from the fountain. The security guard tells him stealing from a fountain is bad luck. That kid is so annoying. You know he's going to die gloriously.
So I have a question because I think that 99% of bratty kids in movies and TV shows look like this kid. So is it that we associate it with, like, maybe Back to the First with Eddie Haskell or whatever, but the bratty kids always look like this kid. They always have that scrunched up face. They're always a little chubby.
He reminds me of the kid from the beginning of Jurassic Park. Same exact thing, right?
Yes. I was thinking the kid from A League of Their Own, who's always making fun of the team.
So right away, when your kid pulls the coin out of the fountain, it's a Final Destination movie, guys. So like I am logging everything. And so I'm thinking, a coin. What is a coin going to do? And man, I'm not sure if you guys are the same way, but when they get into the elevator, I'm watching every little thing to see, is this going to be it? Is this going to be it? Is this going to be it?
That's the beauty of Final Destination movies, is after you watch the first one, like maybe like 2 of the deaths in, you never know what's coming. So like everything is clocking. Like, okay, is it that? Is it that? Is it going to be that? Like because of that. And they do a really good job in that first one of laying the groundwork later on for these movies and making you just like tense and in suspense with how these deaths are going to happen.
Yeah, I was definitely paying attention to the details. I thought the elevator was a bit of a red herring. But yeah, they get into this elevator that says maximum is like 8 people and there's 20 people in this elevator. You get Chet, the elevator operator, like, this project was completed 5 months ahead of schedule. You know that's not a good idea.
And they did something really clever here because, yes, they're setting us up in the elevator for the fake out, but they have close-ups. The woman's freaking out a little bit. So close-ups on lips and shoes and the kids jumping up and down. So yes, completely a red herring, but it's really building up that tension that Marjorie mentioned because we know we don't know what's going to cause the chaos. So we wonder, is this all going to come back later, or is this the tragedy? Is the tragedy the elevator? But no, they get out of the elevator fine, and they continue to toy with us. This is like the longest I've ever can remember of them toying with you, and then, of course, the disaster. Like, this whole segment it's a pretty long opening.
This takes up a good chunk of the movie. And Iris and the premonition and the disaster.
Yeah, it was about 20 minutes of the movie, and I think this is kind of going back to the pacing of the first one, where we're actually introduced to all of our characters before the flight, and then they get on the flight, and they have all their interrelationships and their crushes and things, and then the flight happens. So I think it's similar to that one. The others did get into the disasters a lot faster.
Yeah, and this one I think is one of the longer entries in the series. This one almost ran a full 2 hours, with credits, to be fair.
Yeah, it is the longest Final Destination movie. And what you mentioned, Brock, about the extreme close-ups, this is something these directors just do a ton of throughout this movie. They do close-ups of people's lips eating. We're gonna get a flash close-up of a roast beef getting carved. It's like when they don't know what to film, put on the 250mm lens and pick a random thing and shoot that.
But I think it works so brilliantly because they know what we're doing. People like us who have seen these movies are clocking it. It kind of sets the scene really well, or even reps up the tension just a little bit, like a death is coming. Here we go. It's really well used, I think, for that, and they continue doing that. I work in a skyscraper in the city, and when it's windy, you can feel the swaying, you can hear the steel moaning a little bit or creaking a tiny bit, and they do that here. They have the wind swaying, the swaying steel. They set up the window floor. They go out on the porch terrace sort of thing, and the woman's hat flies off. The kid with the penny is there. Man, they take their time with this.
Literally everything at this Skyview Tower is potential for death. You have the glass floor elevator, glass dance floor, that viewing terrace. The railing was like waist high or lower. What the hell? I mean, because obviously we've all been to like Empire State Building, Top of the Rock, or whatever. There's no way you could actually jump over those. They even have like the fences curved in so that you can't climb up and go over because you're just going to climb up and fall right back down. This was like a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, I don't know why that bratty kid wasn't leaning over anyway, because that seems like something he would do. But everything they show us and everything they spend time on is a variable for death. That you're like, okay, the knife could go crazy, something could happen, the railing was bad, you've got the glass floor, you've got the baked Alaska flaming, which was a very big dessert in the 60s. So, I mean, there's lots of variables here that they're showing us. And I mean, little did we know that it would be all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite the combination of disasters.
Yeah, I mean, they clearly were not in the sky. I'm being very generous to a lot of the CGI in this movie, given what the movie is. However, this is one shot that clearly showed me that they were on a set. They were very good about setting up the height of the building throughout the sequence, except this moment.
I will agree, but I'm going to give it this. Because I thought it looked not realistic. It didn't necessarily look bad. It looked like a painting. You know, it looked a little bit abstract. And then we're going to find out that what we're seeing is a dream. And the rest of the movie does not have this dreamlike quality bad CGI that is here. And so I guess if you can't afford to make it real, making it look like this, stylized, period piece, a little fuzzy, it works for a dream sequence in a way that I wouldn't give it were this not all Stephanie's dream that we're going to find out.
I hear what you're saying, and the concession is appropriate. I guess in context, we can give this one to them.
So they get to the top of the elevator, and we find out these guys don't have a lot of money, but Paul was able to get a reservation because his friend Jake worked at the Skyview, but the maitre d's an asshole. They fired Jake that morning, and when Paul tries to appeal to the maitre d's good nature, the maitre d' says, "You're tearing me apart." Well, I'm writing that line down, and sure enough, he gets torn apart later on in this movie.
Yes, that was very fitting and apropos, given that he was kind of a dick.
And then Iris needs to run to the bathroom. We all know what this means, as does the singer Evie, who's been singing on the stage. She comes out and is like, "Oh, how far along are you?" And Iris is 1 to 2 months pregnant. Paul doesn't know.
And he takes it really well.
Yeah, he does. He's happy that they're about to start a family because he came to propose to her. So starting a family was on his mind anyway.
It's really kind of irritating. Yeah, she was sick, but there are a lot of people drinking there. My brain went to first, like, I didn't register that she was pregnant, and I kind of felt that they were setting up Evie being Bloodworth's mom to maybe have some sort of psychic or all-knowing powers, because I can tell you as a woman, I don't know that other women are pregnant unless they look pregnant, and then I'm still not going to say anything because you never know.
Yeah, as a man, I also follow that logic. But I didn't catch she was pregnant because I figured out the guy was going to propose. That was completely apparent. But the pregnancy thing I didn't see. And then obviously with the title being Bloodlines, once they told me that she was pregnant, I'm like, oh, of course.
But Evie does have a little boy with her who's sitting backstage playing with trucks. And we're going to find out later this is Tony Todd as a young kid.
Did you see it coming?
I saw it coming. After we saw that this was a dream sequence that Stephanie was having, I'm like, oh, okay, this is all going to tie in. And that is Bloodworth.
I did not see it coming. And when it happened later on, I'm like, that is awesome. Good for them for doing it this way.
I did not get this was Bloodworth. If I'd read the interviews and the pre-release material, I would have known, because they said ahead of time they were going to get into Bloodworth's backstory on this one, and they were going to explain why he knows so much about death. And if I'd known they were going to tell his backstory ahead of time, I'd be like, this is him. But because I didn't know that, I'm not looking for him anywhere except the scene I know he's going to be in from the trailer, and so I did not catch it at all. And honestly, I'm not very focused on that little kid. There's so many people going on here, and then so many bad omens. They go up to the observatory at the tip top of the tower. On opening night, that would be crushed, right? I mean, the Empire State Building's been open for 100 years, and you can still barely get to the edge of the observatories on that one. And so here, I can't believe that there's only like 6 people at the top of the tower, but we see a woman's hat blows off, that bratty kid is throwing coins to the ground, and Paul proposes. And you mentioned that shot, Brock, of the penny. It's, again, an obvious CGI shot of this kid throwing the penny. The penny becomes huge in frame. In IMAX, this is like a 50-foot penny, and it gets sucked into a vent and stops a fan. And there's so much that goes wrong here. I mean, even if the kid hadn't thrown the penny, the floor is cracking as people dance. The rivets are already starting to pop. The chef is literally playing with fire. And then the penny breaks a fan and causes a gas leak. I feel like even if the kid hadn't thrown the penny, maybe not as many people would have died. Maybe the whole tower wouldn't have toppled, but that floor was going to go and people were going to splatter.
Well, I think once the floor goes, the place goes down. Like, there's no way, even with the wind and how things are high in the sky, it would have tipped over anyway. But yeah, the confluence of issues here would not have been as severe, possibly.
Okay, so one of my side interest areas is engineering disasters.
Oh.
And there was a very infamous accident in Kansas City in the 80s in a Hyatt hotel where they had walkways. They were all held with rods and screws, and they were elevated, and they had them like a couple stories up, and it just took one little junction point to cause like a massive failure of like all of them crashing down and hundreds of people dying. So it's like one little thing, it can just like keep snowballing, like, and just keep building and building and building until you get catastrophic failure. So even if that penny didn't happen, there are still other things going on. You're absolutely right.
But this is a fun opening kill. You know, the question always is with Final Destination, they're always having the deck stack against them, because where most movies save their big budget disasters for the climax, here they always lead with them. And so when we see the floor is cracking as they're all dancing to shout and the flambe is going on and everything, I love when the floor breaks, people are falling out. We cut to the valet downstairs who was also listening to Ring of Fire. I guess he's listening to the same radio station Paul was. And he changes the song to Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head as the bodies hit the floor.
I laughed out loud because it was Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head and splat. The timing on it was brilliant. It was perfect.
But I'm surprised, Brock, you didn't catch it.
I did catch it. I caught it. It's 1969 is when the song came out, and 1968 is when the movie came out. Oh, I did. I'm too funny a gag to not enjoy. But yes, one of my favorite movies of all time was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So, of course, I caught the date.
And the song was written for that movie.
And I think I would probably complain if they used, like, let the bodies hit the floor or something. I'm not going to get nitpicky about 1 year when no other movie adheres to the correct timeline for songs.
It's so on the nose, but this is a Final Destination movie. So normally it pisses me off when they do it as a shortcut but here it's just part of the fun.
But the people fall, and you think that's enough. Paul falls. He's holding on. He's the last one to go. He's holding on to a shard of glass. His hands are bleeding.
He said he'd never let her go. During the proposal, you caught that, right?
Evie said that. She asked Iris, does he love you? Then he'll never let you go. So I thought Paul would drop her. I thought that was setting up that Paul was going to drop her or she was going to drop Paul. But Paul didn't let her go. Paul had his hands cut up by shards of glass and fell to his own death. Then comes the people running, and the chef catches a woman on fire. This is a world record. 71-year-old stunt woman Yvette Ferguson lit on fire. The director thinks this is the world record for the oldest person ever set on fire for a stunt.
Call the Guinness people.
And then the whole place explodes. People are running for the stairs. The bratty kid yells, "Children first."
I loved the toying here. The side of the stairwell blows out. People fly out. When the smoke clears, the little boy is right there. And he runs away. And I'm like, that little kid, I can't believe he survived that one. Well, not for long. We'll find out. We talked a lot about, on our other podcasts way back in the day, how much Looney Tunes some of these things are. And what's really fun about this series here is when the building starts to tip over, people are leaning against the glass. They're scared to death. And then the camera flashes to the piano. And pianos falling in Looney Tunes cartoons are some of the most fun gags. And man, do they milk it twice with this opening. The piano was just one of those laugh out loud Final Destination moments.
The fact that it's just precariously balanced and that damn penny lands on the piano, and that's enough to tip the balance and smash that Asian woman. And the sound effects of those people hitting the window, like the breaking of the bones, it made me wince a little bit. But the piano goes out the window, crushes that kid. He just splats.
So great.
Then the penny rolls right back into the fountain from which it came.
It was perfect. Obviously, Titanic comes to mind also with the tipping of the building and the people falling. The little touches. This is so well written. They really figured out how to have fun with this. And it continues. They set up earlier when she was proposed to that the ring is too tight. After the piano falls through and the building is hanging precariously, Iris grabs the little boy and they're hanging for their lives because the too tight ring is keeping her lodged in the side of the building. Like little details they really keep bringing back to make it a cohesive scene, and it pays off if you're paying attention.
This was, I think, probably one of the most squeamish parts of the movie, was the degloving of the finger. I have actually seen somebody's finger do that when I worked at Target when I was in college. Her finger got caught, her ring got caught, and it ripped the skin off her finger.
Yeah, Jimmy Fallon did the same thing. I'm sure you know. Like, he has it. Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Not in a Final Destination movie. That's not as funny.
No, but it's disgusting, and they can fix it, but ugh. That's, I think, one of the yuckiest things in this.
That's the thing that got the biggest wince out of me. It's the death that has the least fun with the gore. It's just painful to watch that ring rip her flesh off.
But this is supposed to make you uncomfortable. These things are supposed to make you a little squirmy. Some people get queasy. It did its job, I think, with this scene.
She falls, the kid falls, she gets impaled. And, of course, we're so used to the opening being a premonition, and then we immediately jump to before it and see it averted. So when we jump 50 years later and we're introduced to Stephanie in... I looked it up. If you're learning vector multiplication, you're probably in Calculus 3 in college.
Okay, wait a second. You actually looked up the math? Come on!
I wondered what her major was, and it might be physics, but it's probably theoretical mathematics.
Which I guess goes into this when she becomes obsessed with stuff, that she can able to piece things together and solve the equation of the deaths. I guess it works. Before we go there, though, I want to ask you both a question. We have all seen the Final Destination movies. And the Final Destination movies, when the premonition happens, it happens right before the tragedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's a dream sequence passed down from two generations which apparently is accurate because it's the same premonition her grandmother had. Did it bother you they changed the formula a little bit? Even though it's the same formula, sort of, it is a major change in the way that Final Destination is structured. Because it didn't bother me.
It did bother me because the first movie was really inventive in the ways that people died. It was intense. You were in suspense. Very rare does a movie actually make me tense up. And I feel that this series didn't need a Bloodlines sequel because I don't feel that these were all interconnected enough to have something like this.
I actually am going to go the other way. I like that this was a dream sequence. I like that they're mixing up the formula. We've done the exact same opening 5 times in a row. Let's add something a little bit new to it. I also like they did go with family because in the previous movies, most of the people were out for themselves or maybe trying to save their girlfriend or boyfriend. There were a few sibling relationships, like Mary Elizabeth Winstead had a sister in part 3 or something like that. But other than, I want to save your life because you are human, I am human, we're not mean, there wasn't the I need you to live kind of love that this family exhibits. There was a theory online, and people may still have this, that this tower falling started everything because of so many descendants and so many drawings in Iris's book. She's tracking Flight 180, she's tracking a roller coaster, she's tracking the log truck. Is everyone in the previous Final Destination films a descendant of someone from this tower?
I had a similar thought there. I don't mind it at all because for this movie itself, it worked. Having this be a family and having their tragedies one after another, it's really unfortunate. I feel really bad for that mother who lost all her kids kind of thing. But on the other hand, to have something different but still stay in the same area of Final Destination, I agreed with. However, it did occur to me that this is like one of the biggest retcons in movie history. If all of this is connected to this one tragedy, it didn't work when they tried to make Blofeld be the mastermind behind all of the previous Daniel Craig movies with Spectre. But here I can see it could work. But then again, it's just a theory. It can be this woman logged all sorts of weird and tragic deaths in one central area of the country for a given period of time because she's, off the deep end, right? So it could be, or it just could be a woman who is obsessing with weird deaths. Or maybe it could be a person who's obsessed with true crime. People who do podcasts and people have their interests for whatever varied reason. And this woman, because she escaped death and the premonitions, could just be following all these strange kind of deaths through the years.
Here's why I don't think the theory works, and maybe super fans who run the Final Destination wiki will prove me wrong, but parents survive when their children die in the previous movies. We see both parents alive. So you would have to retcon like every single one of those people were adopted or a divorce happened and the birth parent died beforehand. There's a lot of retconning you would have to do to make all the other Final Destination movies heirs of this tower.
It's a fun thing to think about, but I wouldn't put too much into it.
But Stephanie goes back home because she's been having this dream for months. It's causing her to almost flunk out of college. She was a valedictorian in high school. She goes home. Her dad's there. Her brother's there. Her dad's happy to see her. The brother, not so much. They go to the cousin's house. We're going to be introduced to the whole family pretty quick because Marty is not in the bloodline. We don't really care about the dad so much, so we're going to focus on the cousins, Eric, Bobby, and Julia. It's a fun family. I'm going to say right away, though, Julia never feels like she fits into this family. I think it's the actress, but she never feels like she has a relationship with any of these characters. The other characters all have little background dialogue where they're talking with each other. Julia seems to be standing around. It feels more like Julia is like Bobby's girlfriend, not in that they do anything, but like just because she doesn't interact enough with the parents, and nobody's going to mourn Julia when she dies. We see people get really sad when other people dies. When Julia dies, nobody cares.
Well, she does have a strong relationship with Charlie. We see that. So that's the only time that we see how close she is. But I agree, when she's hanging out at the barbecue and later on, maybe it's because the characterization is not as strong as the other people in the family. I mean, obviously, I think they do care because there's a whole scene of trying to save her. I disagree with that. They don't care that she died. I do agree that she seems blander than everybody else here. I think the actors here made a good effort to differentiate themselves from each other. A lot of times in movies, when they have a big house full of kids, to introduce us to the people who are clearly going to be expendable the rest of the movie, they kind of blend together. Here, they really make an effort to make each one different enough from each other. And then the actors also have different characters. Bobby's an idiot. And it's really kind of fun that he's so not smart, whereas Eric is pretty with it. It's kind of nice that they went that deep into these characters.
It's funny to me because Bobby looks like your typical jock, but he's going to be very sensitive. And Eric looks like a drug addict with, to stereotype, but with all the tattoos and the piercings. I have tattoos. I'm not a drug addict. But if you're going to go the stereotype, he looks very goth and he ends up being somewhat smart. I'm going to say, though, I don't know if it's the fact that Bobby is dumb or if Owen Patrick Joyner just isn't as strong of an actor, but I never feel like there's a whole lot of emotion coming from Bobby. I think Eric outshines most everyone on screen here. I think that guy steals this movie.
Agree completely. I loved this actor. Every scene he is in, he is the one you're watching. I loved him from the get-go. I hope we're seeing him in a lot more movies. He's been in plenty. I've looked him up because I was so taken by him in this movie. A really strong performance in a movie that technically, as you were saying about Bobby, you don't really need a strongest performance. I think he adds so much to this movie.
Yes, I agree on all accounts that this guy stole every scene he was in and he acted circles around everyone else he was in a scene with. But on the second viewing, knowing the bombshell that's drop later on, did you guys notice anything about this family?
Besides, they all look different.
No, everyone is blonde in that family, in the cousins, except for Eric.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Julia's blonde, Bobby's blonde, the mom and dad are blonde, and then you have Eric. And Eric is the only one that dressed in black.
Oh.
So he was the literal black sheep.
Nice. Honestly, we are spoiled that he is here. He elevates the movie.
Yeah. He and the actress who plays Stephanie, who does not have a lot of credits to her name, I think those two are really good in a movie full of, they're okay.
Yeah, but you don't need anything that good for a movie like this because it's a horror movie. It's a Final Destination movie. But these two bring their game. Although my only issue with Stephanie is when they establish she's in college and those first couple of scenes when the way the lighting was maybe, I did not believe for a second that she was 21 or younger. Not for a moment. If they said she was in grad school, I would have been better off with that. But later on, as the movie progresses, you don't care because, it doesn't matter. But in that first scene, I'm like, why does she have to be in college? They could have done something different. She just moved away from home. The college thing didn't fly.
Yeah, the actress is almost 30.
I wasn't necessarily thrilled with her. I kept getting an Emilia Clarke vibe from her. Like, she has that, toothy grin where she's almost smiling, but not quite. I thought she was okay. But I think that the other guy was definitely the standout and the star.
I was getting more of a Jenna Ortega vibe off of Stephanie. They both have really big eyes and very pensive performances in these horror movies where they're both trying to be intense and not being believed and being the young woman in this role. So I was thinking, they wanted Jenna Ortega for this movie. Every movie wants Jenna Ortega. And what they got was Caitlin Santawana.
Exactly. That's exactly how I took it, is that they wanted Jenna Ortega, or they're trying to get the same feeling, the same vibes.
We then get to meet Iris as an old woman. Stephanie gets the address from aunt and uncle's dining room, drives through the woods, gets to this survivalist house where if I was going to fear death, I think I'd have blunt things all around me. This looks like she's preparing for the end battle of Return of the King with all of these giant spiked rolling things. I guess she's trying to keep people out because people could be dangerous for her, but it also seems like having this many pointy things is asking for trouble.
But they're pointing out. And at this point in the movie, I don't know if you guys got this, but I got a major, like, Laurie Strode Halloween Kills vibe from Iris's Fortress.
Absolutely right. And I also thought Castle Fortification, Arnie, but I thought that was perfect because she's over the edge. So who would fortify their house in a way that would only affect people on horseback? Honestly, it doesn't make any sense.
It just seems like a lot of junkyard kind of protection.
But no dog, ironically.
And Iris, though, is fun. Again, not the greatest actress in the world, but the way she's skittish and won't let Stephanie shake her hand and starts talking to air like, oh, you thought you distracted me, didn't you? Talking to death.
I think the old woman here reminded me a lot of the mother in Carrie. It's the same kind of vibe. However, eventually this woman really gets me on her side. Even though she talks to death throughout the house, and even though she seems batshit crazy, I really enjoyed what she embodied this craziness. I was almost believing her, even though I know she's right, but I was almost there. But then Stephanie is with it, and then she gets lost with it. And you can see why. So this woman did a really good job at the performance to really accentuate and play this character, because it really could have come off too cartoony. Here, you need it to be plausible enough, and she did that.
Yeah, and she played a little bit like a loony that if you didn't know what was going on, and you can kind of see Stephanie's mind like, what the hell, I'm getting out of here. And then when Iris dies, it's the same way she would have died at the Skyview Tower.
Yeah, impaled through the mouth.
Yeah.
Nice. But the blood splatter on Steph's face was phenomenal.
That was very, like, grindhouse pulpy. It was so good because it was dark and she was screaming. That was, I think, one of the best shots in this entire franchise. And the look of horror on her face was just palpable.
And the way it was framed in this entire sequence, the filmmaking is top-notch. It even starts when she drives down that tree-lined road that doesn't look all that upkept. It could have been a dirt road because it's in the middle of nowhere. It looked gorgeous. The filmmaking here, it's so good, sometimes you don't even notice how good it is. That's how great it is. Sometimes these movies are poorly made that you notice, oh, they're trying to be fancy, or they're trying to go for something here, or this is so blandly lit. I didn't notice any of that here. The way everything is staged during the death scenes, during the setups, and even something as casual as the car driving down the road, the filmmaking here is better than I expected, and probably better than it needed to be for a movie like this.
I will say it's right where it needed to be. I'll agree there were some, I'm guessing, drone shots. I'm guessing they didn't bother pulling out the big camera crane for this. You know, you can get good footage with a drone these days. But there were some good sky shots both here and at the barbecue and overlooking this entire compound. And we complained about the CGI at the Skyview Tower. But here, I'm guessing some of the fortress we see is CGI enhanced at the very least. I couldn't tell. As far as the blood splatter on Stephanie's face, I loved that too. They did test screenings and the test audiences said more blood. So they went back and digitally added more blood. And I wonder if having it on Stephanie's face, the shape it made just didn't feel like somebody splatted on her face. It kind of was a little circular. I wondered if that was CGI blood on her face.
I don't think it lingered long enough for me to even register. You know, there were clear times of CGI over the top stuff, but for this franchise, for this series, what I think is good, when faces get smushed or blown up, it's over the top enough that it kind of takes the reality of it out a little bit so you don't feel so guilty that you're laughing.
These are slapstick. They're macabre slapstick. They always have been, and that's where they have to live if you're going to make a Final Destination movie.
Well said, and it's exactly what I was trying to say. Yes.
And one thing that bugged me about this movie is the timeline, because you could think that Stephanie just went home for a weekend, and this all happens in one weekend or something, but we jump straight to Iris's funeral, and having had some deaths in the family recently, that's like weeks' time, you know? It takes a while for the mortician, and in this case, the police investigation, you have to buy the coffin, and it takes a lot of time.
The timeline of movie funerals never, ever works. Ever. Like, this is not unique to this movie or this timeline.
No, I've had some deaths recently, so it's more apparent to me. Like when Howard dies later on, they have a fucking headstone already? Jesus Christ, how fast did that guy carve?
I will say the headstones usually do take a month or two because you get them after the fact, but we're not going to split hairs on this part, Arnie. I mean, let's be honest.
I can concede the movie deaths and the movie funerals happen much quicker.
We get a little bit of character development at Iris's funeral. It's a subplot that I feel doesn't pay off. Everybody's mad at Steph because Steph is kind of like their mother. She went off to college and hasn't maintained contact. She used to be BFFs with Julia, didn't maintain contact with Julia. Charlie's all butthurt because Steph only comes home for holidays. He feels abandoned.
Well, because it references what the mother did, right? That's what they're trying to connect. That is a piece of the backstory that I thought does not matter. The tension between her and the rest of the family, I believe, is in the script because that would make them all not believe her theories of the death that she's now taking up from her grandmother who died. That is the only reason I think it's here. So it takes 2 or 3 deaths before the family comes around to the theory.
But I think they kind of just like dropped it like a hot potato and we didn't have that tension anymore. And yeah, there was the reunion because this is the funerals where the mom shows back up and we kind of gradually learn why the mom did take off. And I don't think that the family tension, you're right, was necessary, needed, nor did they really flesh it out. It's just kind of there.
Yeah, I agree. I thought about it. Why did they make this point? Because I was looking at the structure of the movie, because this movie is all about structure and how about the vignettes and how they work together. And so they did spend enough time on this to reintroduce the mother. Is all of that necessary for this movie? I mean, it doesn't necessarily hurt the movie, but I don't think it's needed either.
I think it's needed. I think it's always better when characters have depth. I just don't think it works. I don't think enough time is given to it, and I don't want this movie a minute longer. It's the longest Final Destination movie already. I never feel bored by it, but I'm glad the pace keeps up the way it does, and the tension's always there. I don't need long drama scenes like out of Stand By Me, where Gordy is mourning the death of his older brother, you know? So I just call it out as this didn't work, but fortunately, we're soon at the family barbecue, which was trailer number 2. They took this and cut the entire barbecue down to 60 seconds and showed you Howard's death in trailer 2. So you know what's coming the moment the barbecue starts and they're playing the Pina Colada song.
Oh my God. I think we need to ask Hollywood to put a moratorium on the Pina Colada song. This is the first time that I thought of the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, and there's a couple other cuts from that same soundtrack. So maybe we need to put the songs in movie jail or something, because no more Pina Colada song in movies, please.
Also, Spirit in the Sky is used here. I mean, I'm guessing you can get Spirit in the Sky for like a quarter as often as it's used, but please.
It's like Sabotage and the Beastie Boys. They just keep using the same stuff.
Yeah.
But I will say there are 2 moments in this movie that got me. They really got me. I think it's probably because everything that's going on with our friend and co-host Stuart. But when Howard gets the family together and says, Iris's death should be a reminder to all of us to enjoy life and spend the time we have together because we're not going to get any back. That hit me far harder than anything in a Final Destination movie should hit me. It's both cliche and damn is it true.
What made me feel uncomfortable in this scene was the ice in the blender with the glass shards in it, because that is a very realistic thing that could happen. So every time somebody took a drink from a glass, I was very uncomfortable, and I thought that they toyed with me brilliantly with this scene. And the glass shards in the drinking glasses was not the catalyst for the big death in the scene. I mean, I guess it could be because there's glass shard on the ground, but I thought it was going to be someone dying with their throat getting all cut up and things like that.
I think that the glass and the ice is the only real, like, tense moment on this. I mean, I guess because of the Final Destination movies in my head, it's never what you think it is. But I think the other things could have used some more work as far as adding tension and weaving the danger in there like they do in some of the others. Like, I keep going back to the guy in the second one where the guy wins the lottery and his apartment, like, everything. You're like, oh, that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it. That's gonna do it. And then he gets out and it's the fire escape in his eye. I don't think they wove it enough in this one with all the different dangers. And maybe it's because they spent a lot of time and all their money maybe on the beginning sequence with Iris and Paul as well. So I kind of feel like it suffers a little bit there, and so do the subsequent deaths.
I agree overall that there isn't enough fake outs for deaths, but here I think they're trying. The trampoline is tearing. There's the rake under the trampoline. Is somebody going to fall through the trampoline? I like the character moment. It's really subtle, but it's Darlene who says, oh, stop jumping on the trampoline. There's a rake under it. Well, Darlene, we're going to find out, is traumatized by her own mother's fixation with death. So it would be Darlene living in this Final Destination kind of view.
They did set up the lawnmower a little bit, though, because they showed us him turning it off, or not turning it off all the way. But I didn't think it was going to come into play. Shows what I know. Here I am saying to you guys, I'm watching every little thing. I noticed it, but I didn't think it was going to come into play, especially once they started faking me out and uncomfortable with the glass shard in the drinking glasses.
2 watchings, I can't tell you who had the glass shard in their drink. I think it was Marty on the second time, but I'm not sure. We get the fake out where Julia's coughing, but it's just there was a bug in the drink and she pours her drink out, but we don't see the glass shard then. Somebody else's drink spills, and that's what knocks over the glass shard into the ground.
It was the beer bottle, right? The beer bottle was the glass shard that the father stepped on?
Well, it's not what he stepped on, but the beer bottle started the water, or the hose that knocked the lawnmower.
I made like some charts of this for my notes. The plate hit the beer bottle. The beer bottle hit a hose that I guess is push button. I've never seen a push button hose, but maybe they exist. I guess they do. The movie has one. The hose then fills with water, which moves the hose, knocking over the rake. The rakes and hose fall. Then Howard steps on the broken glass, so he falls. One of the rakes hits the push-button lawnmower. The convenience of Howard's house is what kills him. Everything's push-button. And then the lawnmower, 2 watchings again, I can't catch why it rears up like something in the mangler to chop Howard's head, but...
So at what point does the ball fall into the bathtub and the post falls in the mousetrap, falls on the mouse?
Hey, this is all Rube Goldberg stuff. Final Destination lives and dies by Rube Goldberg's designs.
It absolutely does, and that is part of what makes these movies so fun. This death here, we're all talking a little bit complaint about this one. This one seemed like the weakest of the batch for me. The instances that lead to the next instance that leads to the next instance, yes, these movies are a little far-fetched, but this one didn't feel as strong. I think it's good that it's the first one after the premonition death. In a movie like this, you want to build and build and build. And this one and then one coming up are the weaker ones, but they're early in the movie, so when they keep building, it's okay. But yeah, this one was too Rube Goldberg even for me.
I also think, honestly, I could have used a little bit more gore of a blade on somebody's face. If you're going to do it instead of just showing people reacting to it. It feels a little PG-13, and because it is so prolonged and so interrupted because so much happens. I mean, the scene has Howard and Brenda trying to reconnect and things. I just think they're trying to keep the suspense going while also having human moments. And I'll agree, it's not my favorite death. But I do like this death. I like most of the deaths in this movie, but they just aren't peak. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd give this one a B-.
The lawnmower kicker, right? What actually gets him is the lawnmower goes on his head. I mean, I mow my lawn. I'm always careful anywhere near the blade with my hands and things. However, it seemed really cartoony. And again, it's a cartoon movie-ish, over the top stuff, but it didn't play. I found this one to be the weakest death in the movie.
Lawnmowers in probably the last 20, maybe more years, to engage the blade, to make the blade spin, you have to actually physically hold on to something. And I'm sure your mower's the same. So even riding mowers, you can't get off of it with the blade engaged. So it's kind of improbable. It looked like an electric mower, judging by the little button, but you still have to actually physically hold something in order to make the blade spin and cut.
And it's annoying if I have to take my hands off the thing to change the podcast that I'm listening to when I'm mowing my lawn, that oh crap, I gotta pull the thing again to turn the lawnmower back on. Yeah, it's annoying.
Mm-hmm. And Arnie, going to your point, I think that the deaths in this movie are not near as creative as they were even in the last movie or the movie before that. They seem to get, I wouldn't want to use the word lazier, but maybe less creative. each time we go on in this series, and I feel that the first one is the penultimate as far as these go.
I will almost agree with you. There is a death coming up that was brilliant.
Well, it's not the next scene, because after Howard's funeral, we get a fake out, a not death scene. And if you're watching this in IMAX, you'll know, because all the death scenes are in IMAX. This whole tattoo shop, not IMAX ratio.
Oh, no way! Oh, that's too bad!
Yeah.
They really got you going on this, because it's very much Rube Goldberg. He's at the tattoo shop, he's forced to close out, and he came in as a favor. Thank goodness they mentioned that. I came in as a favor, man, my dad just died. Thank goodness, because we would be questioning it here on this podcast. Why is he working the day after his dad died?
It bothers me, though, that he's giving a tongue piercing to a girl. No aftercare instructions. There's bacteria in your mouth. That woman's going to have an amputated tongue. There's a Final Destination spin-off YouTube short I want to see, is the Final Destination of the gangrene tongue.
I just assumed she got it at the beginning, because afterwards you'd probably just be like, I'm in pain, I need to get the hell out of here.
She seemed to take it really well, though. And then he's giving himself a tattoo that says dad, which is kind of nice, because it always says mom, doesn't it? That's nice, he does that. He had these giant cans or jugs or whatever of disinfectant. That makes sense to me. It's a tattoo parlor. Good for them for taking care of these things in the proper way. But of course, they're highly flammable. What I love about this movie is they put the warning labels in clear view, but they also don't put them straight on. They're always like a 45-degree angle. They do the same thing with the vending machine coming up. Like, it's really clever. Like, here we go.
They did that earlier when Stephanie's going through Iris's book while the others are at the barbecue. They do a shot of the family photo, but they do that canted, like 30-degree angle to show you something's not right.
It's fun.
It's kind of cool. It's a little hacky, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, okay. Also, they're using music the way they're using it here. It kind of fits in with the movie. This tattoo thing, they had me. I was convinced. The gimmick of it for me was not just the fire with the chemicals. It was that his nose ring got entangled in a chain that got tangled up in a ceiling fan. So the ceiling fan, which, again, I'm not sure if it could really support someone's weight. I'm not sure. Indiana Jones had a death like this, I think, in Temple of Doom. The whip was around the guy's neck. He got sucked up into the fan blade. Basically, they milked it so the kid was smart enough to climb on a stool, then climb on a counter, so he gives himself more time to not get cut up by the fan. And by the time he gets the chain out of his nose, he falls over. And again, Indiana Jones, he gets the heart burned on his skin, like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we think he dies in the fire.
There's a couple things I really like about this scene. The first is that bobblehead that starts the Rube Goldberg thing is the Crimson Ghost from Misfits, the band, if you know that. It kind of looks like Death, but with the red cloak and everything, it's clearly from the band The Misfits. And then he's listening to this loud music, and that's causing the bobblehead to go to the speakers. But then he changes it to sad music as he tattoos Dad, right? And there's no bass in Harry Nilsson. That's not going to jerk the bobblehead. But then there is that one moment, that one thump of bass right in the chorus, and that's what knocks it off and starts everything. So much here has to happen, though. Like the tower at the beginning, the bobblehead hits the needle jar, but Eric gets up to clean the glass, and the chair rolls, which knocks over the cleaning material, and then the roof change just loose on its own, so that's not caused by anything. I'm not even sure after 2 viewings. I think it's a lamp that sparks the chemical fire. I don't know what ignites the chemicals. But this was trailer number 1. This was the teaser trailer. I remember seeing this teaser trailer. You don't know what you're seeing. You just see the tattoo guy and all this shit happens to him. And I'm watching the trailer like, this feels like a Final Destination movie. And then it comes up and says Final Destination Bloodlines. I'm like, oh, it is a Final Destination movie.
But this scene, absolutely right. This is perhaps the best scene in the movie. It's not a death. Obviously, Eric survives. But it's got everything that they have had previously in the movie series, where you have a series of accidents, all of which could take him out. Get a little bit of squeamishness, make you a little squirmy because of the nose ring and then getting caught in the fan. A real danger. I mean, I guess if you've got that kind of thing. I mean, it's like a 1 in a million shot. You've got the flammables. And, you know, he's getting out of this. He knows what's going on. And it goes back again to one of the really good scenes. And the fact that we find out that he lives from this is just like kind of crazy and mind-blowing. And this is where the movie really surprised me.
You know my favorite thing about this scene? We're going to find out that Eric wasn't Howard's biological child. And so he's not even on Death's list. So the fireball and the impromptu nose ring zipline, this isn't a supernatural warning. This is just him being a disaster magnet. Death was probably watching, like, should I do something? Nah, let's see where this goes.
I don't like how they explained it away later on in the movie, though, that when you mess with death, things just really go awry.
You mean his eventual death is what you don't like?
Like, how they explained it away. Because his death did come out of left field.
Right.
But you cut outside the tattoo shop, you see the flames, but because we don't see the body burn and this is a gory film, it left doubt in my mind if he died. I did not just chalk him up as dead. So when you see him the next day and he's wearing a fire department shirt because obviously his jacket burned and the fire department had to give him something to wear, I was not surprised that he was alive.
Here is a guilty pleasure death for me. Because he's walking down the street with his fire shirt, right? And then Steph goes all crazy town saying, oh, that soccer ball can hit you in the face. And then it bounces off of this and goes into the garbage can. And then obviously that's exactly how she got into the garbage truck, okay? So that's a guilty pleasure kind of fun thing for me.
This death is a lot of fun because, again, Eric, this is his standout performance right here when he's like humping the truck and pretending I'm invincible. And then they almost do a replay of part one because he's standing in the street and the truck comes behind him. You think they're going to hit him like they did in that first movie. That was even the end of the trailer, was the truck coming at him and then blood splatters on the screen, so you thought it was a death. And then in the background, Julia's going for a run, and you just see in the background everything that Steph predicted happens. The branch cutter hits the guy who has a leaf blower who blows leaves in the soccer ball kids' faces, hitting the soccer ball into Julie's head. And Eric was like, ooh, I think I can survive that. But she gets knocked into a garbage can and then picked up by the garbage people. And of course, they're all running after the garbage truck driver who's listening to Kelly Clarkson, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
Very funny. Very, very funny.
And he's swiping left on a dating app while driving a garbage truck. This guy, clearly a winner.
What I really liked about this scene is the three of them running after the truck trying to save her, right? And so it was really building tension in a different way. Getting her in the truck was over the top, but then going after her to save her is where the tension lied.
Not only did I wince when her jaw is crushed away from her head, but then I laughed that her arm is amputated and Stephanie's still pulling on it.
But she was kind of bitchy anyway, though, right, Julia?
She was kind of nothing, though. I mean, she was nice to Charlie, but a little dismissive to Stephanie. I mean, it's just kind of a nothing character. And again, Eric is more upset in the scene when he finds out he's not Howard's biological child than he is upset that his sister just died.
Jerry Fenberry? Jerry Fenberry?
Is that why he always wanted to play catch?
So funny.
That was really good.
That got laughs out of my audience both nights, was the catch line.
I was hoping Jerry Fenberry would like be coming down the street and get hit by a truck in like a stinger, like at the credits. Like he has a name like, you know, my name is Jerry Fenberry. Somewhere we indicate it's him, and then he gets hit by like a Walmart truck or something. It'd be funny.
But we're going to get rid of Marty and Brenda now and bring it down to the core four characters. In Iris's book, Stephanie saw JB knows somebody who beat death. And Darlene is able to remember Iris talking about somebody named JB. They're trying to figure out, where is it? It's something hospital. They even say like Clear Rivers Hospital. And if you remember, Clear Rivers was that character in part 1 and 2.
Ali Larder?
Yep, that was Clear Rivers. And so they're like that. I think in part 4, I noticed there was also the Clear Rivers water park. So they like making a lot of callbacks. I mean, I definitely think this movie is full of Easter eggs from the previous movies. And I'll say homages to the previous movies. We're about to get to one. But they go to the hospital. I love the scene where they're all worried about the revolving door.
Yes, that was funny. This movie knows itself. The revolving door thing was great, and they totally played it up, and bravo to them.
And I like that Eric comes along, even though he's not in the bloodline, but he really loves his brother Bobby, and so he's going to make sure there's no peanuts on the RV, and then go to make sure Bobby lives. Again, I like that these characters love each other for family reasons and are looking out for each other in that way. Now, I will say, the ending of this movie, I'm 90% convinced was reshot. Because in the trailer, you get to see Darlene killed by this revolving door.
Which one's Darlene?
Stephanie's mom, Darlene.
But Stephanie's mom's Darlene is in a lot more of the movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, but they have a whole bunch of scenes. Like, they have her driving them to the cabin, and they have the cabin thing. That whole thing would be not in the movie?
Yep.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yep. I don't know either. What I've read online is that the revolving door was supposed to be a fake out, and you think she dies, but then, like, the letter L from the hospital sign falls and crushes her. So she was supposed to die here at the hospital. She was not supposed to be in the climax of this movie. And it's well known there were a lot of reshoots on this film. So they get to see Bloodworth in the morgue of the hospital, and Tony Todd, his final role. When we saw this the second night, there was an audible gasp in the audience as people were not prepared to see him looking so gaunt, so ill.
He looked pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
And his voice was affected too because he's so old, you know?
Yeah.
It just made me sad to see him, but so happy that he was there for this. The connective tissue connected his character, the little boy. It was not necessary to have Bloodworth in this movie at all, but it was really great they did.
It didn't feel forced or gratuitous like it often does. And it was a very nice gesture to have him in this part because he was in 1 and 2. It was very nice to let him go out in a nice way and not give him a cheesy part. And it was shocking to see him like that. Cancer's a bitch, and it's sad. But, you know, I think that they did him justice with this.
Yeah, he had stomach cancer, and I'm guessing he had trouble standing because he does his entire scenes sitting down except when he walks out of the room. I'm thinking that might even be why we have a new guy doing the autopsy who we never see again in this movie. You probably would have wanted Bloodworth to be doing the autopsy like he had in the past, but he's going to be sitting at a desk. They were hoping to have him in the movie, but they knew he got really sick. The producer said, we knew this would be his final role. The director said they weren't sure if it would be his final role, but knew he was really sick. But then he was writing to them saying, don't cut me out of this movie. I've got to be in this movie. So he was telling them his desire, even though he was sick, to push through it and do... This is probably his second most iconic role next to Candyman. He was in a ton of stuff, but I think this and Candyman are it. But there's 3 things about this scene that get me. First, he says there's 2 ways to cheat death. The first is kill somebody so you can extend your life by what they have left. That's something they came up with in 5. Or you can die and come back to life, like we saw in part 2 with Kimberly Corman, who gets name dropped here. And that will break death's chain. But in part 2, what the whole impetus for the film is Tony Todd's Bloodworth says new life can thwart death's plan. And so they're all trying to live long enough for that pregnant woman to give birth, because if she gives birth to that new life, then death is thwarted. Then it is discovered in that movie she was never going to die in the accident anyway, so it didn't thwart death in that case. But we had Bloodworth in 2 saying new life stops death. Now, I guess that means being resuscitated stops death, but he could have said that more clearly. So many babies have been born from the tower fall, and now it's death is going through your lineage and killing all your children in order, whereas in part 2, it was at least heavily implied. The clearest interpretation of what Bloodworth says is having a baby breaks death's chain.
So this annoys you?
It annoys me that they're not going with the continuity and rules they themselves set up.
I remember it being, you can cheat death in the 2 ways he said up front. Whenever they changed the rules, or they clarified the rules with Tony Todd. So to bring him back and reiterate that, I did not recall about that whole thing. They clearly were going to try the resuscitation thing here. They set that up brilliantly. However, I think we talked about this years ago. I don't really care about them having these rules. I mean, I understand it kind of helps add some tension or some stuff for the movies, but I don't think it's necessary. I think death has a plan. You cheat death, and it's going in the order you would have died. And it took so long for this one because so many people should not have lived in this one accident. So yeah, for me, it doesn't matter.
The other thing is he does name drop Kimberly Corman, who was the main character of part 2. Now, in part 3, if you remember that discussion, the DVD had a choose their fate feature where you could choose what happened. And depending on which fate you chose, it did say Kimberly Corman died. But if you don't watch the Choose Your Fate edition, you never see that. So they're going with, just the theatrical release, not the Choose Your Fate release of Kimberly's death.
Which is fair.
I have a theoretical question relating to this. So, are we to assume that this is a rare occurrence, that people thwart death? Like, there aren't that many instances? Obviously, we have 5 here. But, I mean, is this it? Because I kind of feel that these people would find each other, especially with the internet. And Bloodworth would be able to link all these people together because he's the one common thread.
I'm hoping that's, if they do a sequel, that's how they do it. Is that the internet brings people together, and that is the catalyst for grouping people together. That is what I'm hoping they do.
You know what would be, I think, nice is not the internet, but that Bloodworth was in contact with a lot of them, and they all come together for his funeral.
Oh, even better. I think that's what it should be next time.
But the third thing that gets me with this scene is at the end of the scene, the directors went to Tony Todd and said, just say whatever you want to say. Just you do these last lines. And again, with everything going on with Stewart, and that Tony Todd died shortly after this, when he says, I intend to enjoy the time I have left, and I suggest you do the same. Life is precious. Enjoy every single second. You never know when. And it's like, fuck.
I thought it was so appropriate. I thought that was written. He came up with that already? That's great.
Yeah, it is. And I thought it was just really well written and a wonderful send-off for that character. That he came up with it himself, it hits even harder. And yeah, it just got me. But now we know flatlining is the option. Darlene, Charlie, and Steph aren't for it, but Eric's saying, Bobby, we're going to flatline you. And I do love the moment with Bloodworth where he's like, who's next? And like... Bobby slowly raises his hand.
And Eric points. They obviously were setting up the peanut analogy. And then they go to the vending machine, and I mentioned before, they focus in on the danger of it tipping over. But what makes me laugh about this was they were going to get the bag of peanuts, and he said, no, I want to eat that because it looks good.
I think it's Bobby says, if I'm going to die, it's not going to be on those unsalted bitches.
That was a nice touch. And I really like how the guy who plays Bobby, he played like kind of dumb and innocent really well.
Yeah, he did. He was really fun. And they go into a room that turned out to be the MRI room to make him flatline. And he took his EpiPen so he couldn't do it himself. And that was kind of neat. However, you would think that, maybe they would be near some paddles or something.
They're down the hall from the ER. He thinks that like he can just push him to the ER in a matter of seconds. That's when he goes to that old lady and says, do you have long left? They went past the NICU and Bobby's like, don't even think about hurting those babies.
That was really funny.
But they both had that moment of like looking at each other like, well, should we?
Yeah, I know. That was great. Are we going to go there? No, we're not going to go there.
But I think that Eric, he's not as dumb as Bobby, but Eric isn't a brain trust. I mean, when Stephanie says she's flunking out of college, Eric does say, welcome to the club. So it's not like he's the one I would choose to put this plan with. But yeah, he gets the wheelchair. He feeds Bobby the peanut butter cup. Bobby starts having the reaction. But this whole time, the MRI has been powering up because of something hit the button. And then it pulls a cell phone, which puts it into research range, which is super powerful.
That was the volcanic heat in a Looney Tunes cartoon or Roger Rabbit. Like, why is that even an option on the machine?
Ludicrous speed, go.
Exactly. That is. There you go.
It's just odd that there's no protocols or anything that they could just walk right into the MRI room, but I'm suspending reality anyway with this.
This is my favorite death in the whole movie. Because the super magnet, you're not supposed to have any metal near you, and Eric is all pierced out. That is the catalyst for his death. And they milk this thing, right? They rip it out of his nose, rip it out of his ears, his nipple rings, and the capper was his cock ring. That was so funny.
I saw it coming. When the nipple rings went, I went, I bet this guy has a Prince Albert. And then it just pulls in the pants.
Such a funny gag.
This sequence got the loudest laughs at our theater last night.
It's so fun. It's so appropriate for a Final Destination movie. And then they have the wheelchair basically fold him in half into the MRI machine, which is gruesome and gross. And this guy is selling it. It was so much fun. Way to play with this character and what they've set up. So it is a payoff, and it was a beautiful idea for an MRI machine death. My favorite death in the entire movie, and I'm sad to see the actor go because I had so much fun in the movie, but this is the way to go out.
I think it's my favorite death, too. I like the humor of it, but also because I just rewatched Final Destination 5. I actually rewatched 4 and 5 between my two watching of Bloodlines because I've been busy and I had to squeeze it in. You know, Eric has this big skull tattoo on his stomach and chest, right? And when he's pulled into the MRI, we get this close-up of that skull, and the wheelchair impales him and comes through the skull. It's the poster from part 5 where Rebar is going through the skull coming at you in 3D. Because I was watching this the first time going, that would be a cool shot if this one was in 3D. It is the recreating part 5's poster with Eric's death.
Nice catch. Nice.
And Eric, he wasn't part of the bloodline, but Bloodworth did say, if you fuck with death, things can get messy. And so by trying to flatline Bobby, that's why Eric gets it. But you think Bobby might make it because he gets the EpiPen, stabs himself. I thought Bobby was going to go earlier when they're shaking the vending machine. The peanut butter cups get caught and Eric is rocking it. And you mentioned how they always put the warning signs in plain view. There was the warning sign that I saw on my vending machine at work that said, do not tip, could cause crushing death. And so Bobby's under it and you think it's going to get him. And no, it's the spring or the coil coming out of the vending machine that cuts his head off.
And this is what we're talking about with these Final Destinations. You just never know what it's going to be. And this movie does it really well with practically every death, that they have a capper death, like they have a capper to it. And the spring one I didn't see coming. Like, it still spins when it's in his head.
Yes. It didn't spin right in the vending machine, but it's spinning on his head.
These little things make it fun. The directors, they understand what movie they're doing.
It does feel kind of rushed, though, at the end with this double death and then what we get later on, and we'll talk about that later. But this feels kind of where it's rushed because there's not that many people left now. There's only 3 people, and this movie's been going on a while.
And again, a lot of this is probably reshoots because I think the mother died. And the mother decides basically to sacrifice herself, not by dying, but by taking on Iris's life of seclusion. As long as Darlene is alive, Stephanie and Charlie are safe from death's design, so Darlene will spend the rest of her life in the cabin. They're rushing to her RV, and wouldn't you know it, that penny, that single penny, which Iris grabbed from the bratty kid's hand and taped in her book, that penny falls out of the book and rolls, and the old lady picks it up. That penny's going to be coming back later.
I thought then that the curse would transfer to her. That occurred to me, and that didn't happen.
The penny made me mad because nowhere in any other previous movies was there any kind of penny linking this all together. Now, if there had been a penny that caused the plane to blow up in the first one, and it was like a little bit of a feature in each one, or like it was a continuing story of the penny, I'd buy it. But this one with the penny, it felt so out of place because we didn't have anything like that before. I feel like we're watching a movie about this 1968 penny.
I think there were 2 callbacks here. Again, I think there's a lot of homages to the previous ones. In part 4, a lady gives a homeless guy some change, and the homeless guy looks at the change and says, "A penny," and throws the penny at some pigeons. The pigeons then shit on that woman's car, which makes her go to a car wash where she almost drowns to death.
That's weak. That's a weak one.
Also, there's the guy having constant psychic visions in part 4. He sees a quarter in his visions, and the lady who goes to the car wash drops a quarter, and so we think it's her who's going to die. But this is the death where a guy drops a quarter down in the swimming pool, and he jumps down, and the drain is on, and it sucks his bowels out of the pool drain. So there were coins there. Also, I noticed again, because I watched 4 and 5 between 2 viewings of Bloodlines, in part 5, 3 different times, somebody pricks their thumb and gets a drop of blood before an accident. In the main crash at part 5, a guy pricks his thumb before the bridge collapse. Then the nerdy guy pricks his finger right before his death by acupuncture. And then the main guy pricks his thumb again when he's on Flight 180 just before the plane's torn apart. And here we have Iris, when she was putting the rose on Paul, pricks her thumb, and we get that 1 drop of blood. And then at the very end of the film, Stephanie's putting a rose on Charlie and gets the 1 drop of blood. I think the penny and the drop of blood are callbacks.
I'll give you the drop of blood. I don't buy the penny one, but I'll give you the drop of blood.
I think you're giving them too much credit, Arnie.
But we're at the climax at the cabin. They do 2 homages to the log truck. The RV almost crashes directly into a log truck, and you're like, ha, that's part 2. But then we're going to get a log death later on.
And the log truck also appeared in the book and on the wall of the grandmother. So yeah, I enjoyed seeing the log truck so much. But it turned out to be a harbinger for later in this movie, not just a callback to part 2.
A lot of the deaths from the previous 5 movies were sketched in that book and also sketched during the end credits here. Again, could feed that theory of the tower started everything, or could just be homages to it. But I gotta say, the movie peaked with the MRI scene. This ending kinda sucks.
It does. This is where it went off the rails, literally. I kind of felt it was rushed. It didn't really strike home with me for some reason. Maybe it's because I didn't really care about these characters as much as I cared about the other family, because they seemed more organic, I guess, if you will. And then the guy that had the really great performance is dead. So by this point, I was like, okay, this movie needs to get over.
So what got me about this was she's trapped in the seatbelt, all the things they have setting up in like varying plot lines of people in danger kind of came off like an action movie to me, not a horror movie, because people are in danger and they have to get rid of this and they have to, who's going to save them in the nick of time, or they can't reach the gun. It just kind of came off to me more actiony than horror genre.
I'll agree with that. It didn't feel in line with the movies. Again, they usually have some kind of suspenseful down-to-the-wire ending in these Final Destination movies, but this one specifically with the house blowing up, it's not as good as the theater disaster that we had in part 4, I think it was. I just think that because they're ramming a gate, which is a stupid move. Oh my god, death is going to get us through an accident. Oh, let's ram a gate with a car.
It's the movies. That's what they do in the movies. They ram things with cars.
And they get there, death is just waiting and has frayed some wires. A light is already sparking. Earlier, there was a funny scene with old Iris. She has this like elbow magnifying glass that old people have to read things. And it points at a silver tray and bounces a sunbeam, and it bounces to a hanging plant and starts to burn the rope on the hanging plant. Here, we talked about the extreme close-ups. Like 2 or 3 times they show that hanging plant. I'm like, oh, that hanging plant's gonna land on someone. No, the house blows up.
You're right, it was like an action movie, Brock. It like really felt like that and didn't feel like it was in universe, so to speak. And when the mom is like, I just need to get in the house, but I didn't enjoy this part of it at all.
It's just kind of dull that Stephanie, who's the character I've liked other than Eric this whole movie, I didn't care about Charlie, I didn't care about Darlene, so that Stephanie is sort of replaying the end of part 2 with the drowning. Meanwhile, while she's just trapped with the broken seatbelt, we're watching Darlene save Charlie from being crushed, and then they do a total callback to part 3 when the light crushes Darlene the same way the pole crushed that guy at the festival.
You know what also got me about the drowning is, they set it up earlier when she goes to see her grandmother, that there's this big, looks like a pond. That's just standing water. So like she's like drowning in standing water, which is gross on top of being unfortunate. Like it's really gross. Standing water smells and it's like yucky. It's like thick and like...
And when Charlie drops the knife, in standing water, you can't just look through it and see where something is, because it's usually dirty and muddy. It's not like a pool or even the ocean where you can just open your eyes.
No, but in the ocean, it's still hard to see stuff in the ocean with the salt water. Like, in movies, that really pisses me off that they can find things in the ocean floor. Obviously, like, deep ocean, you can't, but like, near a beach, people find stuff too quickly in movies. But again, this is a movie. This is a movie conceit, much like ramming the gate. And they just don't remind you that this water's been sitting there for God knows how long, and it's probably full of all sorts of bacteria.
We slowly fade out on Stephanie underwater, fade back in, Charlie's given the CPR, they're safe. She died and came back to life, and we can just walk away, and we cut to their house. Marty, the dad, is there with Paco the turtle, because Bobby was so concerned if he died, Eric had to take care of Paco the turtle.
That was so funny. His dying words could have been, oh, take care of Paco. That was really funny. But here it comes up, and one thing we haven't talked about yet, there's that expression, I'm like a bad penny, I always turn up. And this is what happens. The bad penny turns up again. The penny falls out of the old woman's whatever and lodges itself in the train track that switches, so the train track can't switch properly. That sets up, I guess, the stinger death of the movie. They're outside of a house picking up Charlie's prom date.
Did you notice that it was the street that Iris and Paul left when they were driving?
Yeah, it's the same shot of the train tracks that opens the film that we see the penny get in, and then the same red car, or the same make and model of Paul's red car, drives behind them. So it's the same neighborhood that Paul and Iris drove through, where this Jenny lives that Charlie has a date with for graduation. And Jenny's dad is going to introduce himself as a doctor, and did you guys think he kind of like went to the Larry David School of Acting when he's like, well, you kind of didn't die?
He was a dick.
No, but he was doing, actually, I think you didn't really die. That's so annoying all the time. As far as Larry David, that man didn't go to acting school, but I love him anyway. I just don't like the actor. The actor was not good. I know in these kinds of movies we're not supposed to critique acting, but we've been spoiled here. The mom, I didn't really care for her acting. It was kind of soap opera-y, but Uncle was good with his acting. I really liked the acting throughout this movie, except for this guy really stood out like, that's the guy they got for this. You know, it's a couple of lines. They couldn't find somebody else. Anyway, the stinger death here is great. The train comes, the train gets derailed, goes through suburbia, and we think that they're going to get hit by the train. But no.
We get the logs from number 2.
And the train itself is a callback to number 3, where we had the train derailment death. Or even something getting lodged in the tracks is a callback to part 1, when Sean William Scott got his head cut off by that piece of scrap metal on the train tracks, so...
Oh, right. Or it could just be, you know, something that they did. But I don't know. I think there's enough callbacks here. I just think there's a lot of fun that they have a train in the middle of suburbia being the impetus. All of these things are outrageous. It's a fun little capper death because it comes out of the blue, or in this case, out of the tree-lined street.
What I love is this is one of the few deaths in this movie where they think they're safe and then die. Like, they're running from this train, and the CGI green screening isn't great, but they're running from this train, and then the train comes to a grinding halt and they're okay. And then they're like, and then the train like jerks forward with a little more momentum, and that's when the logs come and splat them. That was fun. And then the end credits where the penny is just rolling through all of the deaths of Iris's book, showing some of the deaths from the previous ones. This is where I got my May 17th, 1968 date on the second viewing. And then the ending, dedicating to Tony Todd.
Well, here's the fun thing about this is, and it's sad, but it totally occurred to me. So the 2 kids die at the end with the logs falling on top of them. So they're the last ones with that line. And then R.A.P. Tony Todd, that means death finished the job because Tony Todd is now dead. You get what I'm saying? Like, because he was the next one in line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Stephanie says Iris wasn't just protecting us, Iris was also protecting you. And now that Iris's bloodline is gone, Bloodworth is screwed.
Right? He was the next one, so I thought that was very fitting. Sad, but fitting for this movie. So, Marjorie, Arnie, do you recommend Final Destination Bloodlines? Marjorie.
You know, I'm going to recommend this movie, and let me tell you why. The guy who played Eric was fantastic. He stole every scene he was in. He was really fun to watch. Like, he got the assignment. He ate it up. It was great. And it's Final Destination. You gotta love the series. It's fun, it's inventive. Even if this one didn't like quite hit every mark, it had enough in it that you're gonna laugh, you're gonna be a little grossed out, probably get a little squeamish. And it is Tony Todd's last movie. And if you love horror, you will want that last bit of homage to him because he's Candyman, which terrified me when I saw it when it first came out, even though I was old enough to know it shouldn't be terrifying, but real people are scary sometimes. But yeah, I thought it was a fine ending. It's got a nice little bow on it. We're done. Although I kind of resent the fact that the penny kind of came out of nowhere and we didn't have a penny throughout the other movies weaving in and out. But, it is what it is. But yeah, I'll recommend it.
Arnie.
Yeah, I think Final Destination is back and it's almost as fun as it's ever been. I do agree with Marjorie, what you said earlier. A lot of the deaths didn't have the fun fake outs of the last one. And also, I missed the trope of death skipped this person, so we don't expect who dies next. We had that a little bit with Julia, but that was always a fun part of the previous ones is, oh, you expect person A to die and person B is who dies. And then the deaths themselves didn't have very many fake outs, like that classic death in part 2 with the fire escape that Marjorie mentioned. And then finally, after Eric and Bobby die, the fun is pretty much gone from the film. Stephanie's drowning is a retread of part 2. I'm sure it's intentional, but that doesn't make it any more enjoyable to watch. The entire climax is a letdown of catastrophes that lack any of the fun of the MRI machine, the garbage truck, or even the lawnmower. So, Final Destination Bloodlines isn't great. It's certainly not as good as 2 or 4 or probably even 1, but that doesn't mean it isn't fun to watch. Like I said, I enjoyed the family dynamic that mixed up the Final Destination formula, adding that people want to save each other out of love instead of saving their own ass. I also really liked Stephanie and Eric, a couple of the strongest characters of the entire Final Destination series. I think these are 2 actors to watch because they brought a lot to this movie and their characters that I think the script lacked. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about Bobby and Julia, who I thought were pretty awful, and we probably won't see those actors much more. And the deaths, I think, are bloody fun, pun intended. The opening at Sky Tower is clearly the biggest stunt they've ever done, and while some inexpensive CG prevents it from feeling real, the falling people, the humor of raindrops keep falling on my head, the impalings, the body burn, the bratty kid crushed by the piano, the maitre d' torn apart, a lot of fun. And then when Iris dies and the blood covers Steph's face, all the gore that comes out in these deaths, the way Julia's face distended as the Crusher mauls it, the MRI madness. And finally, though, the film's reflection on life and death struggles hit me harder than it should. And again, I'm sure that's because of what's going on with Stuart in the ICU right now, but Uncle Howard and Bloodworth's speeches really hit me. Unfortunately, it's sad to me that Final Destination came out in May, because if you're looking for fun kills, a treatise on death and enjoying the life you have, and honestly, the best Final Destination movie maybe ever, we already got that this year, and it's called The Monkey. It was funnier, it was more poignant, and it was even bloodier than this Final Destination. I love The Monkey, and these two hit the same notes. But that doesn't mean I don't like Final Destination Bloodlines. In fact, I'll give it 2 awards. 1, this is the best movie with Bloodline in the title. So put that little statue on your mantle. And 2nd, I think this is a bit of redemption for Zach Lipovsky, whose previous 2 films are some of the worst ever reviewed at Now Playing, and he's getting a green arrow from me for this one. So it's a recommend for Final Destination Bloodlines.
I can't disagree with most of what Arnie just said. I had a similar experience here. Look, Final Destination Bloodlines is like a terrific relaunch for this series, right? I think the 14 years in between the last one and this one did a favor to the series because some of these deaths seem more fresh than possibly they would have if we reviewed this movie after watching the other 5 in succession. The time that it's taken for this new one can introduce these kind of conceits to a new generation, but at the same time, it really kind of goes in line with what we're expecting being fans or have at least seen the other entries in this series. The filmmakers figure out great fake outs and then surprises how the deaths went down. I mean, the Rube Goldberg deaths were clever and fun and appropriately outrageous. I thought the CGI was over the top enough that it didn't really make you think about too much what actually is going on with these people's deaths. It kind of helped with the gruesomeness a bit. The change in the formula of the premonition being a dream instead didn't bother me at all. And obviously Tony Todd was just nice to see. Look, they bring back a lot of dormant series for no reason but nostalgia. And if all dormant series came back as strongly as Final Destination Bloodlines did, I think we'd all be a little happier, you know? So I'm definitely giving this a green arrow. I had a lot of fun, and I know I'm going to enjoy it again when it comes to streaming, and I'm going to sit down and watch it with my daughter, because I think she's going to love it.
And I think we're going to be back in 2 to 3 years to talk Final Destination some more, because this movie is opening huge. Its first night, Thursday night, got $5.5 million, which is more than Sinners got on its preview night. And it's currently tracking, based upon Friday numbers, to get about 46 million in its opening weekend. Early projections were 30 to 40 million. Now, the movie cost 50 million, but I'm talking only domestic opening weekend to almost get your budget back is phenomenal. 50 million isn't out of reach, and that would be more than Sinners made its opening weekend. This movie will not have the legs that Sinners has. This movie will be completely crushed by Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible in 6 days, when Mission Impossible takes all the IMAX screens away from Final Destination. But that's still a great opening, and on its first Friday, it outgrossed Final Destination 1, 2, 3, and 5's entire opening weekends. So this is clearly going to be one of the best grossing Final Destination movies ever. Warner is going to want more of this, especially since Warner's final Conjuring movie comes out this year and they're done with that franchise. They're going to see some money in horror by coming back to Final Destination. And I think they were waiting to see how this one did, so we're not going to be blessed with one next year. 2 years is possible, 3 years is likely.
So yeah, I think we're going to be back in this series, and we're not going to be able to avoid death much longer. Arnie, what's coming up for our listeners?
Well, I've mentioned Stuart several times during this review. I obviously would because he's on my mind a lot. But as I posted to social media, and as was mentioned in the Ghost of the Shell, the new movie podcast that came out on Friday, we actually got some good news. He's been texting me the past few days. He's not out of the woods, but he's doing better. And after all of the emotional turmoil we've had the past few weeks, I really think it's time to take a deep breath and try to have some fun. Stuart is feeling like maybe watching a movie again soon. I thought maybe for our patrons in May, let's just have some fun. Weird Science is turning 40 years old this year. It's a John Hughes film we haven't covered. So this Friday, for patrons, join us as we boot up our computers and watch Weird Science.
Weird Science. I'm really curious how Weird Science holds up in 2025. I watched that movie so much when it was on cable, and we actually dubbed it off cable on our VHS, and we would watch it whenever we felt like it for years. I was able to quote that movie for many, many years. It's where I first saw Robert Downey Jr. in a movie. I have not seen it since I was young, so I will rewatch it before I listen to the episode because I'm dying to see how it holds up. Just one of those movies that is such of its time. What a great idea, and I'm glad. It's an anniversary most people would have missed, but not Hear It Now playing. We don't miss that kind of thing. So Weird Science is coming up.
Well, Marjorie, Justin, and I reviewed Ferris Bueller all those years ago, so it felt right that the three of us go back to John Hughes. Of course, Breakfast Club was our 1000th episode with all 7 of us, so, you know, it's kind of nice to get some of these John Hughes 80s classics. Then next week, no, we're going to not review Mission Impossible 8. Stuart is still in the ICU, and we are not going to do that series without him. The impossible mission is for Stuart to get to the theaters right now, let alone record. We're just hoping, you know, he can get out of the ICU, let alone get to the movies. So instead of Mission Impossible, let's do that other Tom Cruise action franchise, Jack Reacher.
Yeah, it's me, you, and Jason on that one, and being a fan of the Jack Reacher character, I thought it was a great idea to do the duology of Jack Reacher.
Yeah, and we're going to do both next week. That's right, we're doing a free Friday show next week. You know, normally Friday's our donation series. Our donation drive is coming to an end. We have released all of our hacker movies, 3 of the Ghost in the Shell movies. When Stuart's better, we will get all donors that 4th movie, and all of our werewolf movies. So next Friday, there's not going to be a donation or a patron show. There's a free for everyone show of Jack Reacher, Never Go Back. And then in 2 weeks, Brock, UI, and Jason go back to another franchise that's been dormant for almost a decade and a half, Karate Kid, with Karate Kid Legends.
You know, after Cobra Kai started and then lasted so long, I probably shouldn't have been surprised we're getting another Karate Kid movie, but I am. This came out of the blue. And so I have no idea how they're going to work all that stuff in from what they just did on Netflix and I guess YouTube Reddit first. We're going to find out when we wax on and wax off about the Karate Kid series once again.
So thank you for listening to Now Playing. Thank you for supporting Now Playing. Thank you for supporting Stuart during this time. For everyone who got the Stew Crew t-shirts, we appreciate all of you being part of the Now Playing community.
So till next time, we'll see you soon.
Your friend's departure shows that death has a new design for all of you. Now you have to figure out how and when it's coming back at you. But remember, the risk of cheating the plan, of disrespecting the design, could incite a fury that could terrorize even the Grim Reaper. And you don't even want to fuck with that, Mac Daddy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Now Playing.
Well, that went well.
Remember to come back to NowPlayingPodcast.com each week as we review another film.
I was meant to see this movie.
And in the NowPlayingPodcast.com archives, you can find reviews of other films, such as Saw, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Terminator, Star Trek, and many more, as well as individual movie reviews such as Man-Thing, Inception, and The Human Centipede.
This is the beginning of the end.
You can also follow Now Playing on Facebook and Twitter, where we post announcements of new episodes and where the hosts post mini movie reviews. Links to our social media pages are at NowPlayingPodcast.com.
Hey, don't knock my fan base.
Support from listeners like you help keep Now Playing operating.
Fuck, I saved him!
You can find a link to donate using PayPal at our website, NowPlayingPodcast.com.
You're dead! You're dead! And you ain't taking me with you!
Now Playing's Final Destination series is edited by Heath and Arnie.
Let's go take a shit.
Now Playing is not affiliated with New Line Cinema. The Final Destination series is the property of New Line Cinema and no infringement is intended.
That is some spooky psycho babble.
The opinions expressed on Now Playing are those of the individual hosts and may not reflect the opinion of Venganza Media Incorporated.
You're way dead.
Now Playing is a Venganza Media production, copyright 2025, and no part of this show may be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without the written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated. All rights reserved.
Don't worry. Once the others are dead, it'll come back for you.
I'll see you soon.
Today we're talking about Final Destination, Bloodlines, starring Caitlin Santa-Huanta. Is that Huanta?
I would say Wanta.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Caitlin Santa-Huanta.
That sounds funny because it kind of rhymes. It sounds like Huttese.
Wonga wonga.
Uncle Henry was Iris's first child, so now Henry's 3 children.
It's Howard, not Henry.
Oh, Howard. Did I say Henry earlier too?
Yes.
Yes.
And I had to check in your notes to make sure that I was like, I thought it was Howard, but...
Okay. Thank you for catching that.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it, and Heath appreciates it even better.
You're welcome, Heath.
That's when Aunt Barbara, who married into the family, so isn't part of the bloodline, reveals Howard wasn't Eric's real dad.
Arnie, it's Brenda.
My God, am I tired.
And just so we're clear, the turtle is Paco.
Yeah, Paco.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Julia was always next in line, and now it's Bobby's turn.
It's Robert, not Bobby. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So Barbara and Henry.
Howard.
So Barbara and Howard. Like when Howard dies later on. Howard, right?
You got it right, yeah.
Yes, you finally got it right.
You know, we get Howard and Barbara, like, trying to reconnect during the scene. The whole barbecue scene has so much going on.
It's Brenda.
Oh, this running gag is great. I love it.
I know. I think at this point, we just need to leave it in.
You know my favorite thing about this scene? We're gonna find out that Eric wasn't Henry's biological child.
Howard.
We're gonna find out that Eric wasn't Howard's biological child. But we're going to get rid now of Marty and Barbara? Is it Barbara?
Brenda.
Where this Jenny lives that Charlie has a date with for graduation.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a quick question. The one person that's in, like, less than 10 seconds of screen time, you remember her name, Arnie?
Yeah, Jenny.
Okay.
Because they're talking about her with Julia earlier. Julia and Charlie are talking about Jenny.
Oh, Arnie, you're not getting where she's going with this. You can't remember Howard and Henry, but you remember Jenny. That's where she's going with this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marjorie.
You were correct. Thank you for catching that. I was just floored that he got Jenny out, and I'm like, fuck! She was barely on screen!
Was I calling Barbara Beverly in this movie?
You mean Brenda?
Brenda, yeah.
Brenda.
There you go. So you can't even get the question right.
Because I'm wondering if I'm thinking of Howard the Duck with Howard and Beverly.
Oh, all right, maybe. All right, maybe.
That could be. It's Howard and Brenda, though.
Almost. You're almost out of the woods.
Luckily, you don't have to say them ever again. I didn't enjoy, as you call it, Arnie, the climax at the cabin, which could be like a movie title in itself.
Well, I think it's on a porn site somewhere.